Am I supposed to be able to see that?
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Cold Start Corner. I'm Eric Matei, joined by the one and only Dr. Brianna Rhue and Dr. Jenn Tabiza. Dr. Rhue, Dr. Tabiza, thank you for being here. For many of our audience out there, these are probably regular names across your wire here years of late. And the reason being is that Dr. Rhue and Dr. Tabiza are really paving the way with leveraging technology across their practices and across modern eye care. So we're really excited about this conversation with them today as we're going to dig into this a little bit more from the standpoint of leveraging technology in your cold start or recently purchased practice. So Dr. Rhue, Dr. Tabiza, how are things?
Good. Thank you. Good to see you.
Excellent. You know, I know it's been kind of an ongoing dialogue we've been having here for the last few years, right? As we're seeing so much radical change with tech in eye care. And what we're really looking to do here today in this conversation is serve it up as it pertains to looking at the role of technology on three fronts. And that is from the standpoint of the patient experience. It's going to be from the standpoint of operations and workflows, kind of the day-to-day. And then third is rethinking profitability and practice economics by leveraging technology. So before we jump into all the Q&A and the topics and such, please go ahead and I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. Well, I know a lot about each of you, but perhaps for those viewers who this is their first time connecting with you, please introduce yourself, a little about your background, and then we'll jump into it. So Dr. Rhue, if you'd like to take it away.
Sure. So I am a private practice in South Florida, and now going through a buyout of that complete private practice. So sitting in a lot of shoes right there, and co-founder of Dr. Contact Lens, which brings us here today. And excited to share what's on up and coming there.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Rhue. And Dr. Tabiza.
I'm Jenn Tabiza, also an optometrist. I have a private practice, which I have recently expanded into a med spa, which is really exciting. Also co-founder of Dr. Contact Lens, and here to share the knowledge with all that needs.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, y'all, I know we've got a lot of really great things to touch on here. For those that are viewing live here on a social platform of your choice, do feel free to chime in. There's some questions out there. And definitely, as we conclude, you're going to get everyone's information if you wanted to reach out individually to continue the conversation. So, y'all, what do you say we take it from the top and maybe start by just kind of exploring, what do each of you see as being the role of technology right now in modern eye care?
Well, I know for me, it's been huge, especially with the staffing shortage everyone's facing. I have basically followed the rule of if a human needs to do it, that's the only thing my humans do. So if technology can do it, technology will do it.
That's interesting. I'm going to want you to elaborate a little more on that as well. And I think we're going to be jumping right back to it here, particularly when we're jumping into this whole area of like operations and workflows. So I love that. We're definitely going to toss that out there in the field of idea bubbles. Dr. Rhue, what's your take on it as far as like the role of tech? Dr. Tabiza says it's big like operations, workflows, allow the data to move smoothly. What's your take here?
My big word is friction. So where are you creating friction with your customers, your patients, your practice, your staff, yourself? And how can you get rid of that friction to enable yourselves to stay the competition?
That's fascinating. It really is fascinating because I think, and in part right now, I think at times folks are somewhat resistant to technology because they're intimidated by it and they don't realize all this friction in the day-to-day that these tech solutions can really serve. So as we start to dig a little deeper, y'all, as we were kind of talking off camera before going live here, we really kind of wanted to evaluate this from three perspectives, that being the patient experience, from the perspective of operations and day-to-day workflows, and from the perspective of overall practice economics. So On that note, I'd maybe like to kick off the dialogue to Dr. Tabiza, getting back to perhaps elaborating a little bit more on how you're seeing technology serving your practice and your staff in getting through the day-to-day.
Yeah, I mean, we use technology throughout the day, whether we're checking in a patient, I'm seeing the patient, they're ordering glasses, contacts, giving them a prescription. I mean, everything is done with a swift click of a button as much as possible. The patients definitely remark about our ability to just give them things quickly, get things done quickly. There's never even, I shouldn't say never, but there's almost never a wait even to see me. Like people check in, they're back, they're pre-tested. You know, we have this seamless flow. If I put humans on the job, you know, huge pain point, of course, is why we founded Dr. Contact Lens. If I had humans on the job processing manual contact lens orders to the office, 20 minutes a patient is the average we spend, we wouldn't be able to offer that experience. So I'm able to see more patients. The patients notice it because they've been to doctors' offices that have a workflow problem and it stinks for them. You know, they're sitting there, they're waiting, they're like, hello, hello, hello. You know, that really doesn't happen very often, if ever, at my practice. And I take a lot of pride in that. But, you know, I had to figure out all the ways I could roll out, again, what a human what a human can do only the humans do. Talk to the patient, see the patient, sell to the patient, answer the phone. That's their job. But running reports, ordering things, you know, checking in, checking out, if we can automate that, we have. And so it's made a huge difference in just practice efficiency, but also how the patients feel. They feel like things are moving and they're quick and they always report how happy they are.
Love it. Love it. And I know we're going to come back to a little bit here talking about that implementation process, right? Because I think it is important for everyone to realize that this obviously is where I think a lot of providers want to be. They'd like to see their independent private practice get to this point. So I'm eager to dig in a little bit deeper here, talk about how you've gone about implementing that in your practice. So Dr. Rhue, you know, to kind of further elaborate on that role of technology and how is it impacting day-to-day operations? How is it impacting that patient experience? What are you seeing in your practices? You've really embarked on this journey and modernizing the practice, applying tech to it.
Really, it comes to exponential growth, right? So looking at the data that we all have in our practices, so data you can leverage in a multiple different ways, right? You can have insight behind data. It can give you knowledge, but data is only one thing by itself. You have to be able to do something with it once you get that out of it. And that's what we wanted to create at Dr. Contact Lens. So again, it's about automation and being there for your patients when you're not there. So one thing that we look at across the board are when orders come in, right? We see the majority of our orders, between 30 to 40% of them, come in between 6 p.m. and 9 a.m. I don't have a human available to take an order at that time. The other thing that we see in practices is between 12 and 1:30, right? Jen and I do this often. We'll close down the office for a staff training between 12 and 1:30 p.m. Guess where 40% of our orders happen? Between 12 and 1:30 p.m. So if you're closing your office, your patients have to be able to do business with you, but it's not just a link on your website. A lot of this has to be driven in other directions. So how are you going to leverage that and be able to move your data from one place to another? And maybe we can hit on that in a second, on staying agnostic and why our platform isn't free and other ones are.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, on that note, let's jump into that, right? Because now we're getting into the role of, hey, if we know this endpoint we want to be and have these as fixtures of the practice, what's the path to get there? So maybe let's start by talking about it, as we're going to now go into kind of this implementation front. And by the way, viewers, audience, whether you're tuned in live or whether you're watching a video there on your platform of choice, look, we could talk hours on end, the three of us on mic, and definitely, and Dr. Rhue and Dr. Tabiza, you've got folks that are definitely visionaries, really pushing the envelope. So if you haven't already, be sure to connect with them in LinkedIn or on Facebook. and continue that conversation. So y'all, now let's dig into implementing, right? So we talk about data, talk about analysis. I think where a lot of folks get kind of overwhelmed is like, oh my gosh, I look at a practice like Dr. Tabiza, right? She was sharing about where it is now, but it's not like it just happened. There's a process to it. So if y'all would each kind of walk us through your process of how you've gone through kind of that data-driven insight to then, implementing the solution, right? So Dr. Tabiza, why don't we start with you on this implementation front?
Yeah, so I will kind of think of all the steps a patient has to take to come see us, from scheduling all the way from before they see you. What's happening on my website? What do they experience there? Is there live support on the website? Is there an online booking link? Great, right? So you get that ironed out by making sure your technology from the beginning of the journey is there for the patient, so that you don't need, again, if you have a staff shortage, if you have problems finding staff, these are things staff used to take care of, right? And then from there, when they check in, how can I make a check-in less than a minute? I've created all digital forms. You can actually do it yourself from a website called Jotform. You don't even need advanced fancy technology. My HIPAA form is there, consent form is there, and make things super simple, super easy, one signature, the easier, the better that you make it, right? And how can I create that 1 minute check-in? And so again, these are kind of what I think through, and then I try to look for a solution. And I can promise you there's always a solution, and sometimes it's even free, to streamline it, right? So their check-in is quick. They scan a QR code, they get checked in, they're taken back. And again, I think through what's happening when they're there, what can happen while the patient's there, what technology can I use to also continue to streamline their experience. If they're getting glasses, if they're getting contacts, if they're coming to visit my med spa, everything is digital for them to engage with. So when they check out, they get a digital copy of their script. And so these are all the things you have to think about. And then you look for the tool to resolve the issue that a human was taking care of, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's the receipt, whether it's the prescription, whether it's the contact lens order, whether it's the intake forms, look for your solution all the way through for every encounter type and everything you experience. And then the rollout is you have weekly meetings with your staff, and you keep asking the staff, what are our hiccups? Where can we speed up? Why did I have 15-minute wait time last week? What can we do? And then you'll think of, okay, that's a problem. Let me fix it. And you'll look for the tool. If you look for the tools, they're always there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really like how you started through the lens of the patient, right? And I think those of you viewers out there, right, definitely put yourself in the shoes of your patient and realize how most of us, at least increasingly, are coming to utilize and favor simpler ways of doing things, so that we can do what? So we can go home and live on a rock? No, so we can be people. And that, I think, is the beauty of all the stuff with technology, right? And Dr. Tabiza, you had said this early in the conversation, like, if a machine can do it, let the machine do it, so that the people can do the things that only people can do.
Right.
Which is the head, the heart, the smile, the all of these things. So I love it. So keep the patient at the forefront. All right. So Dr. Rhue, then, as from the standpoint of assessing the situation, determining your path forward, talk a little about how you inform your decisions when you're going to deploy technology in the practice.
Yeah, so it comes to bandwidth, right? As we're all seeing more patients than ever before with less staff, it's about, some of that has to be with automation. And it's not, I think a lot of us are scared to put more things on our staff, that there's going to be this revolt of some sort, right? It's in the beginning, anything new is going to be worth the effort. But if you give it, 5 to 7 days of implementation and going all the way through the process, and for 6 weeks, this is the process that we're going to discover, find a tool, implement it, and then move forward. It's not about, okay, is this working in 6 months? You may not even see that it's working in 6 months. It may take you a year all the way to see or to reap those benefits. And then it's just going, for the future. So I think during the pandemic, right, 2020 was supposed to be this great year. We had all these big plans. All of that obviously got shifted. and we were just worried about living. Now we can get back to these 1-year visions, back to these 3-year visions, back to these 5-year goals, where it's not these little leaky buckets that you have to fill. It's a big leaky bucket that we have to fill and put tape on, and just doing one thing at a time, but getting your staff involved in that process, but not letting them, say, oh, this can't work because of XYZ. At the end of the day, you're the business owner and it's up to you to drive it. So remember, again, who is in control, and make it part of their energy, make it part of their effort, that they can help you and then help the practice and help themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you touched on so many critical pieces there, right? And I think most importantly is that role of realizing that there is going to be an adoption curve. And I think sometimes folks, they discount that or don't remember what it's like, right? Because oftentimes we're for many practices, they're living in this world of it's the way we've always done things, right? So kind of that shift, have to realize, and something else you said that I really love, bandwidth for change, right? Like what is exactly how much can we get through at one time? So let's talk a little bit about how we do two things. Number one, because and we've had this conversation quite a bit, right? And I know we have conversations with doctors around all of this stuff. I really hope that was just a bad connection. She was able to hop back on, because it is a great conversation. By the way, also, I've got Dr. Brianna Rhue and Dr. Jenn Tabiza here joining me on Cold Start Corner. We were talking about technology and your Cold Start. Dr. Tabiza, we thought we had lost you, but then we realized that we're, between Dr. Rhue, East Coast, Dr. Tabiza, West Coast, and I'm South Coast in the middle. But it's nice to be here connected in the ethers. Okay, so now we're talking about what I think we were talking about adoption curve, right? And realizing, like, all right, the first thing we need to do, or there's two things we need to do. Number one, we need to convince those around us that we're going to run with it. And when you say convince those around us, I'm specifically speaking of, hey, doctor, practice owner, you now have a team of however many that while you have this vision, we need to be respectful of that bandwidth for change. Now, you are the sole decision maker, though. And I think that's something that Dr. Rhue mentioned a moment ago, is like, you're still in charge. But let's talk about two things. One, how do we overcome that barrier from the staff of it's the way we've always done things? And then two, if each of you would share some of your best practices in those weekly team meetings and in those follow-ups, which I know was referenced earlier. So Dr. Tabiza, if you want to start with, again, how do we overcome it's the way we've always done things? And then to take it a step further, when you get into that weekly follow-up, how do you keep it rolling?
Well, I think, I will be honest, something that I cannot relate to is that sentiment, because I've always changed everything all the time. So they know. But to give advice to someone stuck in that loop, because I recently actually spoke to one of our customers, a doctor contact lens, and she called me and she's like, I can't get my staff on board. Like, how do I do this? I want to use it. My staff doesn't want to use it. And I just said, look, let's get to the bottom of the reason why your staff has an issue, because likely it's an issue they have inside, right? So like, let's say, for example, they didn't want to ship all their stuff home because they were under this impression that they need to see their patients and they need to come in, and that's just what they do, right? So that's where their discomfort is coming from. There is a reassurance as a leader in this practice that you have to give your team, like, hey guys, we're not going to go out of business because of this. So like, let's get to the bottom of the issue and let's talk it out. And I always turn it around on my staff. Hey guys, what would you want if you went somewhere, right? Would you want a seamless experience where you get a text and you get the tracking and the shipping and it comes to your house? Or do you want to see us and do you want to drive all the way back in the traffic, the crazy world we live in with all the millions of things we have to do and come see? Even though human interaction is wonderful for small business, you have to turn it around on your staff to try to get them to understand, why are we always making changes? Because every day in every way, we're getting better and better. That's actually a famous mantra by some famous guy. And, I always say that, like, I've never had resistance because they're used to that mindset. But take it a step further, the doctors need to have that mindset. Everything is reflecting on how we lead. If We don't like change. If we don't understand the point, they're a mirror for what we believe in.
Sure.
Everything is very spiritual. It's always like, what's really going on? So if you find that your staff is resisting you, take a moment and think, why are they resisting me? Am I the one who actually has an issue with change? Because if you didn't, you'd run into those meetings like I do, like, hey guys, excited. And they mirror back the excitement, right? They will mirror it back to you. So it's okay if you realize it's been you the whole time. It's okay. It might be even something in your life that's coming up where you're like, why am I resistant to change? But change it's the rule of life, right?
That's it.
We don't get to escape change. So
Absolutely.
You can try, but
embrace it.
Not going to go. Yeah. So
embrace it. So I really like how you point that out, right? It's get down to the root core. And I think that's where, to your point, there's so much going on at any given time. So it's easy to be like, no, right? We're going to keep doing things the way we've always done it, even though it's driving us crazy. No, I'm not taking the time to make the change. So it's important. It's also something else you mentioned, that is to be the perennial leader within your practice.
Yeah.
Right. And for that matter, no matter what stage of practice lifecycle you are in, no matter how big or how small that team is, no matter how many locations you have, always be the perennial leader in that practice. So Dr. Rhue, if you want to share a bit of your thoughts on how do we overcome this, we're going to keep doing things because it's the way we've always done it. And then also, what pearls do you have? I know you've got a great practice down there in South Florida with a pretty sizable team, and you're constantly implementing really cool things in the practice. So maybe you could share some of your best practices here too.
Yeah, I think best practices, and this is one thing that I'm fortunate enough, is just surrounding yourself with doers and with people that are in that environment that are wanting to grow and change, and that you can go in, because practice ownership can be very lonely, right? So if you don't have people that you can constantly bounce ideas off or ask them a question on what they're doing and find that kind of share tank of what you're doing and how you're driving business forward and changing a mindset, like I make 1 or 2 phone calls on my way to the office in the morning of just shooting it with somebody else that's living it. Because when you go home, you can't really have those conversations, and you can't have those conversations with your staff. So sometimes you get stuck, and that's okay. So it's finding really your tribe and who's going to move forward. And I think what's really exciting on what we've actually bridged the gap from is really what industry is telling you that you need, but you as the doctor understanding that really we're the pawn in the entire system. And if we actually take advantage of that, we wouldn't have to be stuck in this kind of scarcity mindset, right? This is a very abundant world. This is a very abundant business. And it's just about putting little things in place that can really take you from that $1 million practice to 1.5 to a $2 million practice. But doesn't all have to fall on you. So even though, the majority of the time you're the engine in the practice, you got to figure out who else you can lean on and delegate that down, so you don't have to worry about the little things, and that your staff and patients are taken care of.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head also with something there. And that is the fact that there's a lot going on out there. And I think now more than ever, as we've seen this radical consolidation in healthcare and a radical consolidation in eye care, in all facets of eye care. I mean, whether we're talking vision correction and full scope eye care, medical, specialty care, what have you, there's been such a radical acceleration of consolidation and the role of massive conglomerates running the supply chain and these vision plans that are also kind of get in there. So it really is. It's fascinating the degree to which technology can actually position the independent to truly remain an independent and have this sustainable, thriving business without having to rely on some of those forces that are now, unfortunately, I mean, you said it a moment ago, Dr. Rhue, I mean, the degree to which doctors, ECPs, have become kind of the pawn in the equation, right? So, by the way, I think that's going to be like a whole other, wow, y'all, we could probably get some, we should have another talk about that. So, all right. So, moving right along here. why don't we speak a little bit as we're kind of wrapping things up? There's two more key things that I want us to jump into. One is, where do you see the big opportunity right now? Like, what is that missed opportunity that you see? Like, hey, there's one thing you need to do, go for it. And then number two, definitely share with us what the latest is in Dr. Contact Lens. I know y'all doing some far out stuff. We got a number of Akrinos clients that use Dr. Contact Lens. So again, first question, like, what do y'all see as like that number one big glaring opportunity out there? And it's presumably something you've already done in your practice, so like you see firsthand. And then number two, let's jump into some talk about DCL. So whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I think one glaring thing here is obviously Dr. Contact Lens. If you haven't implemented Dr. Contact Lens, there's a shameless plug there. Contact lenses, there's a lot of money in contact lenses and contact lens patients. So as Jen is shifting into a med spa model, as I'm shifting into a myopia control dry eye center, all of that stems from your contact lens patients. So it's not about the one patient that walked out of your door. It's about the one patient that walked out the 35,000 to 40,000 doors that are out there that are letting these online conglomerates start to make a lot of money. And so if we collectively start to invest in things like Dr. Contact Lens and look at things that are agnostic, right? If you're going to 4 different ordering platforms and you have 4 different ways for patient experiences and 4 different ways for your staff to order, right? You're not going to rebate yourself to wealth. You're not going to save yourself to wealth. You're not going to do things that are free to make a substantial change in your practice. You need to pay for these things. So it's about an upfront investment for your future and now, and then to keep going and use that process, use that time, use that exchange to really embed a process and a platform. So do your research. The EMRs are really kind of the holdup in a lot of these things, right? So it's important that you kind of push your EMRs to be better. You need all these bolt-on services. It's important that you're part of this.
So why don't you just comment on that briefly for those viewers that may be kind of like some of that's law. I know, look, the three of us, I know we talk tech all the time. Why don't you kind of share with someone what you're meaning by that and kind of what they could do if they were like, hey, I want to be able to build this stuff in. Why don't you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the electronic medical records, they do a great job on what we need them to do, but they can't move fast enough for what we actually need to compete in this online changing world and to be there for our patients. They just don't have the resources or can't move fast enough. So being then OD built, right? We know what this one piece of this puzzle is, and we've built a solution for it. So it's got to be these bolt-on services that you're going to add in, but we also need those integrations. So you have to be at the forefront of calling up these EMRs and saying, hey, are you integrated with this? Why not? And you got to push the buck forward because they don't know what you're wanting, or they've said no to us, not saying, not knowing that 5,000 of their users want this. So we have to speak up for what we want.
Absolutely. Dr. Tabiza, let's now I feel like we're gonna go blasting off out of this. I love it.
I mean, this is gonna be so lame, but I'm gonna just say the same thing because my biggest source of passive income is contact lenses. I mean, like most days, my staff texts me every day. I'm not there every day. My staff texts me every day what our daily total was in sales, and they always do a separate line item of how much we made on contacts online. Reorders. I'm not talking live in office. And sometimes it's neck and neck with what I did in office. I'm like, this is silly easy. But sure. Yeah, I mean, a second to that, of course, like expand your practice, like find a niche. Niche is where you can get away from insurance, which is the number one thing everyone wants to do. I chose aesthetics and dry eye. I expanded with an MD partner so we could have a full suite of services to patients that are already getting it elsewhere, but just hey, now they're getting it with me. So find it. I can't say what the thing is. There are some great specialties within optometry that you can pick. But if you don't want to be a hustle and grind optometrist, you pretty much have to specialize and you have to get really smart about where you can make passive income. And there are some places. So it's just, well, it's right in front of you.
That's it. Yeah, right. It's like the opportunity is there. Right. And that's what I think this conversation was really great, right? Because I it's fair to say, I think everyone knows that the opportunity is there. I think there's fear. I mean, it was said earlier in the conversation, right? It's fear. Why? Because it's the way we've always done things. It's fear. Why? I don't want to have to put one more thing on the list. Let alone the fact that injecting that into the list now actually removes a lot of the list. But a lot of really great stuff here. So, so how can folks? Well, hang on, before we go into how can folks reach you all, share a little bit more about Dr. Contact Lens. Although I would like to think by this point in time, most everyone has heard of Dr. Contact Lens. But yeah, give a background on how things have been going. As I mentioned earlier in the show, we've got a number of clients that use the platform, and I mean, it's incredible. I mean, as far as that patient journey, as far as day-to-day workflows, as far as practice economics and profitability, in Dr. Contact Lens, there is a solution. Getting back to what Dr. Tabiza said earlier, like getting into some of these core elements, there's a solution there that really fires on all of those. So please, Dr. Rhue, if you kind of want to elaborate a little bit more on Dr. Contact Lens.
Yeah, so it's all again about patients want to do business with you. We're just not making it easy or convenient for them to do so. And so with Dr. Contact Lens, what we do is within a click of a button, you can invite the patient. So those patients that came to you for an eye exam and walked out of the door, instead of printing a paper copy of a prescription, you're going to text them a link where they can download and print it themselves, or they can see their vision plan benefits are there, their rebates are there, and they can end up ordering from you, which then sends them the tracking information. And then as we're getting into these premium dailies, right? Patients, again, think of yourself as a consumer. Do you have $1,200, $1,300 to come out of pocket for a daily that your doctor just prescribed? Probably not, especially in this environment, right? And so if you sell a 6-month supply, you're going to text them because you know when they're going to run out, the reorder link. And so all of this, again, 95% of it is driven from the text message and email. Only 5% of our orders are coming from links on people's websites. So yeah, it's a must-have, but that's not really what's driving all of this. And then really, it's showing you all of these patients within your practice who are due to reorder, who are due to come back and see you and take action, so you can drive those patients back to your practice to then again go into myopia, go into dry eye, go into aesthetics, go into other things. And so this is just a core thing of your practice that is no longer a want or a nice to have, but an actual need.
Boom. Love it. But it really, look, I say that from the standpoint that as you're saying that, I am thinking straight up of like knowing the ROI that this will have, right? Because the fact is, and as we've touched on in a few different elements of this conversation, right? There comes a time where conventional approaches are just not enough. Like, even if it is the most expert trained team saying all the right things with the right sales scripts, there comes a point where it's like the process itself needs to be redone, right? Like, you could have had the most magnificent horse pulling the most magnificent buggy. It's still a horse and buggy, right?
Yeah. And I'll share one thing here.
Take that from the guy that likes to ride his bike like every day, but what else?
Well, we had an office we onboarded not too long ago, and within 6 weeks, we had sent over 4,000 text messages to their patients, and they processed over 700 contact lens orders. And I'm saying, is that happen for every practice? I wish that it did, right? For instance, this practice had that kind of clientele, and they were just sitting on all of this. So can you imagine, Jen, processing 700 orders in 6 weeks? Your staff would have gone bonkers, right? So again, all of this is just a seamless, easy to use system, and that's what it takes.
Dr. Tabiza, closing thoughts to build on that. More fuel on the fire.
If you're going to own a practice, you really need to come to two terms with it. You're an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur. You own a business. You cannot just be a doctor. If you want to play that role and you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to own a business, you have to invest in yourself in the practice all the time. It will never stop. It doesn't stop just because you started it. It doesn't really is it's a journey of creation all the time. So just be in that mindset and you'll be really successful. If you get stuck ever, you never get to stay still and just chill. Then go work for somebody.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
my best.
And hey, at the end of the day, it's living out your vision, living out your why. And I think that's something that, to kind of wrap this all together, I know from, as we've met and started collaborating on different things over the years, it's something I know the three of us have all talked about quite a bit. And to your point, Dr. Tabiza, if entrepreneurship, if practice ownership is something you want to do, then be prepared now to do it in a modern manner, because what it takes to really thrive in a sustainable independent practice these days is different from what it was even just a few days ago. Hey, so Dr. Brianna Rhue, Dr. Jenn Tabiza, co-founders of Dr. Contact Lens, all around amazing people. For those viewers out there, if you are yet to connect with them on the socials, definitely connect with them in LinkedIn. I know they're constantly on different podcasts, writing articles, a lot of really great stuff also. So, also, how can folks get in touch with you all if they wanted to continue the conversation and learn more about Dr. Contact Lens?
They can reach out to us online, drcontactlens.com. You can book your own demo there for a convenient time that works for you. And for the month of April, again, we understand that your time is very valuable. So if you come and book a demo with us, we will pay you $50 for that time that you spend with us. So when we talk about time as an asset, we're giving that back to you. So come in and do a demo of Dr. Contact Lens and sign up there on the spot.
Cool. And then you'll get your measly little $50, because the real money starts coming in once you implement DCL and see what Dr. Contact Lens can do for your practice.
Exactly.
Well, Dr. Rhue, Dr. Tabiza, this is great. Thanks so much for hanging out here at the Cold Start Corner. And until next time.
Thanks,
Thanks.
guys.